Hey guys, this is Substitute Topher. Today we're driving a 2016 Ford Taurus SHO. This is powered by a 3.5 liter twin turbo EcoBoost V6. It makes 365 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. Power is sent to all four wheels via a 6-speed automatic transmission. And while this car is quite special to me, as my grandpa bought it brand new, ownership then went over to my dad, and we are now looking for a new home for this Taurus. So I figured before we moved it along to its next owner, I ought to take it out on the road, show you all what it's like to drive, because I don't think we've ever driven a Taurus SHO here on the TheTopher channel. So we're gonna walk you around this thing. We'll talk about some ownership impressions. We'll talk about what it's like to drive this 2016 Taurus SHO with only 29,792 miles. And yeah, you guys will be along for the ride. So before we take it for a drive, let's hop out and we'll take a look at it. We're gonna leave the key in it so it doesn't honk at me. Here's our key fob. I'll stick that in the cup holder. Cool. So here it is. Grandpa had some eccentric taste here, and he went with red when he ordered this thing brand new in 2016. And I always liked the Taurus SHO, and Grandpa actually had 3 of these. This is his 3rd one, and I was the reason that he got his first one back in, I think, 2013 or 2012, somewhere in there. And his first one was actually a black car, then he had a red one in between, and then his last one here was also red. But I always loved these cars growing up because I thought the whole idea behind them was pretty cool. And of course there were Taurus SHOs, SHOs, whatever you want to call it. Of course those cars existed in the 80s and the 90s. They had the Yamaha V6 5-speed manual transmission. But when they brought the car back, gave it all-wheel drive, gave it almost 400 horsepower, it was cool that America had something like this to fight some of the German rivals. Now, this is basically the same engine that you got in, well, anything else that had the 3.5 liter twin turbo V6, the Lincoln MKT, the Lincoln MKS, the Taurus SHO, and I believe the Explorer Sport, and maybe even the Edge Sport. So Ford kind of shared this powertrain around with some other cars, but it was most at home, and it was kind of pioneered here by the Taurus SHO. Now, like I said, it's done 29,000 miles. It's got a fresh set of tires on it that we just installed a couple weeks ago in preparation for sale. And well, this thing's got quite a few options. This thing even has massaging seats. So let's go ahead and look around this. I'm gonna pop the trunk because I don't have the key. It won't let me pop it from outside the car. The trunk button is a little button here on the dashboard. It's pretty simple to just hop in and pop it. And remember, this is kind of an old school American sedan, which means it's massive. This is a 4,300 pound car. And well, the size of the trunk certainly demonstrates that. Look at this trunk. You could fit so many things in here, including probably a few of me. Actually, probably more than a few, probably like 7 or 8. Ton of room. Also got the factory Taurus SHO cloth floor mats and the cargo net still in the bag. That'll come with the car, of course. Here's my backpack for scale of just how big this trunk really is. What I love about this too is we have a strap on here to pull this shut. This is something I feel like we don't get a lot of nowadays with sedans, other cars that have trunks, is you kind of have to touch the paint to close it, but you can just grab the strap here and the trunk will shut. Rear spoiler there, SHO EcoBoost badge. We've got dual exhaust and kind of an understated look. I mean, the regular Taurus didn't really look too much different from this car. The main differences were you got a unique grille, you got SHO badges on the fenders, but that's kind of it. There wasn't a ton that set this aside exterior visually wise from just a regular Taurus. Of course, we have some SHO branding inside on the seats as well. You can see there on these full leather massaging seats. Let's pop the hood and take a look at that 3.5 liter EcoBoost twin turbo. There she is. Now this car was rated at 365 horsepower from the factory. I know a ton of people that slap a simple tune on these and they're making well into the 400s, some even into the 500s with this powertrain. But even as a stock car, it still feels plenty zesty in my opinion. I remember the days growing up at actually that dealership that's right over there, driving these when they were new as a teenager. I thought that they were quite quick. So pretty cool to be back behind the wheel of one of these, especially with all of you today. That's shut. Let's hop in the back seat, see what room was like back in 2016. See a pretty immaculate back seat here. No one ever really sat back here that I know of. Well, I sat back here, I think, probably a few times. So backseat room is pretty good. The only thing I'll say is this backseat kind of sits up kind of high. It's almost like they were going for stadium seating of sorts. So there's enough headroom for me. There's enough legroom. But it's funny because if you get in a newer car that's a segment size smaller, the backseat size is pretty much the same. We have a fold down armrest here with 2 cup holders. That's pretty nice. But I mean, pretty nice leather material they were using back then. It's pretty similar to just the same stuff that Ford uses now. These are perforated seats, and in the front they're heated and cooled as well. And we'll grab the Monroney out of the glove compartment. We'll see all of the options that this car has, including heated rear seats that have 2 settings. So that's kind of cool. Little charger there in the middle. You've got your own climate vents to aim at yourself. Leather on the door panels and almost this like faux carbon fiber trim that runs throughout the cabin of the car. We have a black headliner, very sporty, and we have some little reading lights back here as well. Cool. Let's hop up front and see what we've got going on up there. We'll get one last little side profile shot. Yes. Proper thing. Pretty simple layout up here. This was kind of the last of these Fords that operated simply, of course. We have some physical controls, but actually a lot of them are haptic, which is something we're seeing a lot with cars nowadays. Ford was kind of ahead of the game there. Our AC, our climate controls, everything, they are still on their separate panel, but they are haptically controlled. So I can turn my vent up or down here just by touching this little piece of black trim. But before we get into some of this other stuff, let's take a look at the Monroney and see what options we have here on this Taurus. So this Monroney has actually been kept really nice. Base price on this car back in 2016, $40,275. As tested today, $46,020 this car was. So in the grand scheme of things, really not that expensive, brand new. 46 grand in today's money. With all of our inflation, it's probably like well into the 50s or maybe even the 60s, but 46 grand is what this car was new. As for options, we have Group 401A that gave us the Sony sound system, which I think we should test today. We'll see if we have a chance to. Rain sensing wipers, blind spot monitoring system, which is our little blind spot indicators there on the mirrors. We have a heated steering wheel, rear window power sunshade, which is actually something that I'm just now learning. This has a sunshade? How do we put the sunshade up? Okay, well, we're gonna figure out how to work the sunshade here by the end of the video. Anyways, though, heated rear seats that I showed you guys, ruby red is our color, voice activated navigation, moonroof, and also multi-contour seats, which is Ford's way of saying massaging seats. And we actually have a menu right here for our massaging seats, and we can adjust the lumbar in 3 different ways, and we can press massage here. And you can hear that. Obviously, you can't feel it because you're not here, but you can hear it massaging me. Pretty cool. Now it'll go back to its setting there, and you can of course switch this between driver and passenger. Multi-contour seats. This was only a $595 option, so not too bad. Grandpa opted for the 20-inch wheels instead of the 21s, which very smart. Okay, let's put this back and let's talk about some of the other things up here. Well, our center console, it's got enough room for things. You can see my phone is in there right now. We've got cup holders here with the key in them currently. We've got another, actually, we have 3 cup holders here. So you're able to have 3, 4, 5 cups up here in the front. Don't know why you need to do that, but Ford accommodated for you if you needed to do so. Aha! Man, that is cool. Okay, I'm gonna have to add that to my photo gallery. Who knew that a Ford sedan in 2016 would have had a rear window shade? Okay. So, what do we have up here on the dashboard? Well, we have Sync 3, which was Ford's newest infotainment at the time. And I remember when this came out because I was working at the Ford dealership and I thought that it was the coolest thing ever. I thought it acted just like a smartphone. And for the time, it honestly reacted pretty quickly. This is not a bad infotainment system, even for being 7 years old at this point. It does pretty much everything you need it to do. It's 1 year out, unfortunately, from having Apple CarPlay. They got that in 2017, but you're able to run an update on this and add Apple CarPlay if you would like to. We also have ambient lighting in here. You've got a bunch of different colors. This is more colors, honestly, than you get on a lot of new cars. Some new cars only give you 3 or 4 choices. This gives you 7. So, nice. What else? We've got voice control. We've got, like I said, that Sony sound system. You can adjust that in here in this menu, as well as speed adaptive. And you can also switch between surround and stereo mode. So we had some cool settings here for our Sony system. Let's go back to nav. We'll drive with that today. This cluster was pretty standard what you got on all of the Fords from this era. We've got 1 central mounted analog gauge and 2 screens on either side of that. You can change what these do by pressing the arrows. You can have a digital speedo, you can have a rev counter, you can have distance to empty, or if you scroll over, you can choose even more settings. So there's a ton of different things you can do in here. I like to have my rev counter for when I'm using my paddle shifters, and you can mess with what you have on the right-hand side as well. I have that set as navigation, but you can also do entertainment or phone. I like to have my little compass there. Other than that, we've got a big central mounted volume knob here in the middle. Works great, very easy and within reach. But otherwise, it's just a very nice, honest American sports. I think I would call this a sports sedan. One of the last that we got from, actually the last that we got from Ford, because they killed the Taurus in 2019. So this is towards the end of the production run here for the Taurus in general, and of course, the Taurus SHO. Sunroof on this car. We'll leave that shade shut for some more even lighting, place to put your sunglasses, home link here. But I mean, honestly, it's everything you need, nothing that you don't. So let's go ahead, take this Taurus SHO on the road, see what it's like to drive. And well, one of you may end up being the next owner of this car. So make sure you pay attention, hang out with me, and see what this thing is like on the road. Got a reversing camera. Our lines here swivel with the car. Put this into drive again, 6-speed automatic. We've got steering wheel mounted paddle shifters behind our leather wrapped steering wheel with just a few controls, nothing really overwhelming. We've got a volume selector here, just what you need. Now we're going to take this down to the normal test loop. We'll merge onto the highway, do some highway driving. One thing that I think is very of the times and very American is this very instant throttle response, because of course the Americans think that a very fast and instant throttle response means that the car is sporty. And with this car not having drive modes, honestly, it makes sense. With this being the SHO, it's going to be a little bit jumpier than just a regular Taurus. Good sound there from that 3.5 liter V6 and very smooth shifts from our 6-speed automatic. Now this is not any sort of high-tech advanced transmission, but it gets the job done, and it really fits the persona here of the Taurus SHO, because while this is still a sports sedan in the way that it has almost 400 horsepower, it was the highest powered Taurus that you could get, it isn't rough. It's still a very cushy, floaty, couch-like American sedan. And that's what I love so much about this, is it's not trying to be anything that it's not. And it's something that we don't really get anymore. This was the last of a breed with a lot of these Ford performance sedans, Chevy with their Impala SS, their Monte Carlo SS, Chrysler with their 300 SRT8, things like that. Yes, they were performance sedans, but they weren't break your back performance sedans. They were still floaty couches that just happened to have a little bit more power. Of course, we have better brakes. We have some different tweaks to our suspension system. And this is definitely a different car from a regular Taurus. But what I'm trying to say is it's still the ideal daily driver spec. I mean, this is such a nice car. When my dad got this from my grandpa, I want to say it had 23 or 24,000 miles on it. And he got it all the way up to 29,000 because he preferred driving this over his brand new F-150 that he's currently leasing. So that goes to show that, I mean, it's just a nice car to drive. It's a nice, relaxing experience. The ride is sublime. And with it being a 29,000 mile car, it still feels pretty fresh as well. Of course, normal dings, scratches, worn things on the interior. With it being a grandpa-owned car, you kind of just get those sort of things. It's to be expected. The steering's weighted nicely. It's not the lightest steering in the world, but I think that's one area where Ford wanted to make this feel a little bit sportier. So the steering does have some weight to it, but it feels nice in the corners. Of course, this thing is a little floaty, but you still have pretty good steering feel. when you are hustling the Taurus SHO. Transmission drops down nicely. Seems like it always pretty much knows what to do. I don't find this 6-speed searching for gears or anything. This is one of those cars that I think right now is a little underappreciated just because they did make a fair amount of these. But this is one of those cars where one day when 90% of them are gone, I feel like they're going to be quite sought after because they're kind of low key. Like I said, they don't really look like anything crazy. But you can put a simple tune on this car and exhaust intake and they are monsters. They get the job done. Okay, going along here, highway speeds. Can set our cruise control like so. Nice, and yeah, this thing just floats down the highway. Let's use this time while we're just floating here down the highway to test out this Sony sound system. Honestly, for this being a 7-year-old system, I think it sounds pretty good. Certainly not one of the best things I've ever heard, but it has enough power. Of course, with this being an American car, they like to give you lots of bass, lots of power. But we still have some nice high notes, and it sounds pretty decent, honestly. No real complaints. And we don't really get Sony sound systems anymore. I don't know that anybody really uses Sony. Ford may have been the only one using them to begin with, but Ford now uses B&O Play. Now, we don't have a sport mode per se in the actual car. There's no sport button, but what we do have is a sport setting for the transmission, which allows us to use these steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. This thing gets up to speed pretty quick, 350 pound-feet of torque. And this will hold gears. It'll let you pull downshifts. All the things. Looks like it grabbed a gear for me there. I think it grabbed third and then I grabbed fourth. So I guess maybe it won't hold gears, but you do have the option to use the paddle shifters, which is nice. Obviously, everything now has paddle shifters, but this did back in 2016. So, okay. Testing out the brakes there. Thank you so much for that. Let's pop ourselves back into drive. We'll have to go around this corner a second time. Let's go ahead, put it in S, and we'll kind of let it do its own thing, and we'll see how it gets off the line here. There's 60. I want to say Ford claimed 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds, and I believe them. I mean, it gets off the line. For a 4,300 pound car, it does a pretty dang good job. Let's see how we get around a corner. Keep in mind, all season tires. Yes. Oh man, it's cool that that these exist, and they existed up until 2019. So you're able to have one of these that's still a fairly new car. I mean, shoot, even this car, 2016, to me, that is still a fairly new car in my opinion. Overall, though, just a nice daily driver that's able to merge onto the highway safely, able to get out of the way, and able to have some fun on a back road, able to take off from the lights, scare your friends, whatever you want to do. It's just a cool car that often flies under the radar and goes unrecognized. Actually, speaking of flying under the radar, I want to talk about one more thing with the Taurus SHO. I was driving the Maserati MC20 a couple weeks ago when we had that car, and I was being followed by a Taurus SHO for the last like 5 minutes of my drive, and it was a black one, and I was terrified that it was a cop. So this one obviously doesn't fall under that criteria because it is red, it is polite, it lets people know that you're not a cop. But if you drive a dark blue, a gray, a white, or a black Taurus SHO, then well, you certainly blend in as a cop, because a lot of cops still drive Ford Taurus police interceptors, and they've got a very similar front grille to the SHO. Okay, anyways, that'll wrap it up for us today with this car. Hopefully you all were able to get a bit of driving impressions here from behind the wheel of this thing. And, well, I'm gonna miss this car. I mean, I've known it since it was new. I helped Grandpa order it from the Ford dealership, and I'm sad to see it go, but it just sits around at my house. Nobody drives it, and it's time for it to move to its next owner. And this will be a great car for somebody. 29,000 miles, very fresh car still, brand new tires, all the stuff. Cool. Well, that'll wrap it up for us today. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Let's take one last look at this Taurus SHO before we let you go for today. Ruby red, looking nice here in this golden hour lighting. All right, guys, that'll be it for us today. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.